Hello, Robs. We're back with So the Witch Won't Eat Me, Fantasy and the Child's Fair of Infanticide by Dorothy Bloch. And I'm going to sneeze here. I am going to sneeze. There you go. You got to hear the sneeze. Continuing on page 26. Our activity throughout the major part of Ellie's treatment was concerned with two dominant themes. In the first, Ellie was a baby or bratty child in the beginning. A very bad baby, talking, crawling on all fours brat of a baby, and I was the all-suffering, helpless mother who was completely at her mercy. In the second, we fled the pursuing monster, although he clearly represented her father. The disguise provided by her fantasy allowed Ellie to discuss him freely in her father's presence. I took to inquiring about him as one would about a member of the family, and elicited the information that usually he was mean, but occasionally he could be friendly, or even nice and cuddly this morning. The themes of baby or bratty child and monster might be played in the course of the same session, or one might be granted dominance for one or more sessions and then be dropped briefly, only to be resumed once more. Sometimes on a different level, both themes developed in the course of the next year and a half, and each had its own resolution. The pattern of the monster theme was first introduced by Ellie's sudden, gleeful announcement. The monster is after us. Come on, we have to run. He's after us. And we ran over the terrace into the playroom, up and down the hall, dodging, hiding, stopping, perpetually pursued. Frequently, on arriving for her session, Ellie asked, "Do you want to play with me?" My assent was then followed by, "Will you help me run? The monster is after us." Or we might be engaged in another game. Shopping. For that purpose, Ellie carried a small basket that contained a collection of necessary objects, which were checked over each time. There was play money, a few small toys, and inevitably a gun. Although our peaceful activity might continue for some time, eventually Ellie's cry, "He's after us, come quick, we have to run," would send us scurrying. Ellie's radiant smile and squeals of laughter at first created the impression that we were engaged in a delightful game, and it took some time to adjust to the beguiling facade that she had found most effective in dealing with her world. Occasionally, however, when the effort of flight caused her to drop her guard, I caught glimpses of such driving terror as to leave no doubt about the deadly seriousness of our occupation. My reading of its meaning was also double-checked by the communications of the baby theme. This commenced with such directions as, "You put me in the playpen and I crawl out and you put me back. De capo and de capo and de capo." Or is it da capo? Or else I cry for my bottle and you give me my bottle and then I throw it on the floor. Then I cry again and you give it to me again and I throw it on the floor. All this activity could be subsumed under the heading of driving the mother crazy or being a bad baby, and was apparently designed to justify the mother's negative feelings. Ellie tackled it with relish. Sometimes she started the session on this theme and crawled down the hallway on all fours into the playroom, making appropriate gurgling baby noises. "Well, I see the baby is here today," I exclaimed with unconcealed delight. After a momentary response to my greeting, Ellie started on her antics, always within the context of the game. This continued for many weeks and paralleled the game of fleeing the monster. Then a sudden change in the content of the baby game alerted me to what appeared to be a dangerous development in Ellie's situation and set off an alarm that caused me to alter the pattern of our monster game. In her usual gleeful manner, Ellie announced, "The baby's getting into the washing machine. Come on, we have to pull her out." "Pull, pull, pull," she cried gaily, and then, "She's getting on it again. We have to pull her out." It has occurred to me since that there could be several interpretations to such a fantasy. I responded to it, however, as though I had received a suicide note attached to a time bomb. There was no doubt in my mind that we were on a rescue mission that had nothing to do with naughtiness. Underneath the laughter, there was no mistaking the desperate cry for help. My surmise proved to be correct. This marked the beginning of Ellie's death fantasies. The sense of urgency it communicated caused me to re-examine and to alter the direction of the monster game. I felt it was no longer enough simply to flee from him. We had to challenge and to conquer him. Yeah, shouldn't you have been doing that all along, saying, "Hey, there's no such thing as monsters"? "I'm going to play a game with you." I'm sick and tired of running away from the monster, I suddenly announced soon after. And in the midst of flight, it's time we stopped him, I insisted. We're not letting him get away with it anymore. Ellie looked at me in great bewilderment, greater skepticism, and with just a hint of suspicion that I had gone out of my mind. Nevertheless, she followed my lead as I reversed our direction and began to chase the monster. You get out of here, I shouted. We've had enough of you. Although I had to take the lead in our resistance for a while, it wasn't too long before Ellie took over and echoed my words with relish. He's not getting away with it, right? She cried, and sometimes she turned the hose on him. He was not so easily routed, however, as I was to discover again and again for many months. No sooner had we driven him off in one direction than up he popped from another. He also engaged in a complete change of tactic. From having always pursued us at a distance, he suddenly started to attack Ellie directly. He's on my back, she yelled. He's choking me. I quickly turned on him. Get off her back, I shouted, tugging at him. Get out of here. And after an appropriate time, I exclaimed with relief, there, that took care of him. But I spoke too soon. He's biting my shoulder. He's breaking my arm, rang out, and once more I came to the rescue. At times, his power seemed so overwhelming that there was nothing for it but magic. I have a magic powder, I declared. When this touches him, he's going to disappear. There, I cried, throwing my hands around. That will show him. The magic impressed Ellie for a while, but inevitably the battle was renewed. The increasing desperation of Ellie's fantasies and the parents' report of her regression a few months after a dramatic improvement in her behavior sent me on a search for clarity that led directly to an investigation of the parental environment. I had already noted in Ellie's actual appearance the signs of deteriorating care. She sometimes looked unwashed, and her clothing was somewhat bizarrely put together and completely out of touch with the season. You should see now where kids are wearing short sleeves in the winter. Although she started wearing her snowsuit as it grew colder, she was frequently dressed in the lightest summer things underneath. She also had a bad cold during this period. My research into the causes of the reversal uncovered a number of traumatic factors. From the very beginning, I had urged that Ellie attend a nursery school so that for several hours a day at least she would not be exposed to her mother's depression. There had been a waiting list just prior to the change in Ellie's fantasy, however. The mother had been informed of an opening and had responded with severe despondency and confided to Ellie what a sad thing it was for mothers when their children had to leave home. She also offered as a solution the possibility of having another baby. In addition, the father was away a great deal during this time. He was also deeply concerned about finances and had insisted just prior to leaving that therapy either be cut down or terminated. The effect of all these factors on the mother was reflected both in her parents and Ellie's and in the more mounting despair of Ellie's fantasies. The baby is dead, she proclaimed with pleased surprise soon after these discoveries. I felt somewhat stunned by the news, but all the information I could elicit was that it had happened on the highway near the beach. Following this development, our play dealt with one hopeless situation after another. Most immediately, Ellie declared, it's raining. We have to run. Every suggestion of refuge, however, was negated. Let's go indoors, I offered. It's raining indoors, she countered. How about the closet? It looks nice and dry in there. It's raining in the closet, she persisted. And in truth, there was no place on earth where it wasn't raining. There was no shelter anywhere in the world. Not much later, Ellie's news became even more alarming. I'm disappearing, she blithely announced one day with the same undertone of desperate emergency that accompanied the washing machine fantasy. And not only Ellie, but many other things were disappearing. I listened at first somewhat nonplussed by this development and asked some questions that later seemed completely nonsensical to me. Then I realized that all that was required was action. I'm not letting you disappear, I asserted, grabbing hold of her from behind. She strained against my grasp as though she were being pulled in the other direction by 1,000 demons. I'm not letting you go, I affirmed, and continued to reaffirm intermittently. For the next 2 months, every time this theme recurred, confirmation of Ellie's approval of my handling of it was clearly expressed. Help, I'm disappearing, hold on to me, became the amended signal that energized me. It did not arrest the downward thrust of Ellie's Despair, however, I'm in the bottom of a well, and I'm dead, she announced one day, falling limply onto the couch. I'm not leaving you in the bottom of a well, I responded. I'm not allowing you to be dead. I rushed over, seized Ellie, and half carrying, half dragging her considerable weight, I got her to safety, which was the floor space about 10 feet away. There, I cried, depositing her. As I continued to reiterate my determination that she shall not die, she gradually began to come back to life. Where am I? She exclaimed. No sooner had she fully revived, however, than back she went to the couch. I'm dead, and I'm at the bottom of a well. The rescue operation had to be repeated again and again. Both Ellie and I were impressed by my efforts, and quite possibly there was something in their tirelessness that finally caused a breakthrough. Ellie began to look at me in a wondering kind of way. In subsequent sessions, I'm dead and I'm at the bottom of a well, and you rescue me became the corrected version of the fantasy and marked the turning point in Ellie's treatment. The monster game also registered the change. Ellie was no longer attacked by a huge creature who could destroy her. Sometimes he was still referred to in the singular, but more often he assumed a multiple character, all on a diminished plane, however, very much like a swarm of insects or of tiny animals. We now tiptoed around, hiding from them, and spoke in whispers. Sometimes Ellie delicately pointed to all the places where they were biting her, and I drove them off. They're biting my neck, she softly confided. Or they're on my arm, or my feet, or my cheek, or my elbow, or your feet, or your arm. With a sweeping gesture, I brushed them away. Sometimes, however, they alternated with a friendly monster who didn't mean to hurt. At the end of one session, Ellie announced, next time the monster will only be friendly, and he will lick us. Dad? During this period, Ellie was still occasionally disappearing, but with the final demand, hold on to me. The monster could also still be very menacing, but he had definitely been brought into contact with the law. I was a cop whom Ellie summoned by telephone each time her house, a corner of the room behind the puppet stage, was invaded by monsters. I arrived, listened to her complaints, drove the monsters out, and put them in jail. During the era that coincided with the reign, I was ineffectual as a law enforcement officer as I had been at providing shelter. No sooner had I locked the monster up than Ellie exclaimed, he has the key, or he's breaking to the window, or he's coming out the side. It was not a losing fight, however, as my efforts with the well had revealed. There was finally one session when, for the first time, Ellie allowed herself to play with the blocks while she directed me to keep the monster locked up. While she busied herself building a road, she instructed me to admonish the monster. You can't get out of jail. You stay in jail. You're never getting out. She kept me on my toes, interrupting from time to time. I can hear. He's trying to get out. I periodically issued threats to the monster and repeatedly demonstrated that the door to the jail was securely bolted. Apparently, under these conditions, it was possible for Ellie to feel free enough to engage in conventional play. It was almost a year and a half after Ellie's treatments had introduced the monster when I became aware that several weeks had gone by without any reference to him. The monster doesn't seem to bother us anymore, I commented. No, he's gone to another country, Ellie replied. Nevertheless, continuing for some time after that, a mean spider perpetually peered through a window in Ellie's drawings. The mother theme had several variants. In a frequent one, Ellie went shopping with her basket and with her baby, the doll Kathy, and I simply accompanied them. At a certain point, Kathy became ill and a doctor was needed. Usually I was instructed to be the doctor. Sometimes, however, the doctor's kit was too attractive to pass up, so Ellie chose that role and relegated the mothers to me. During the period when there was no shelter from the rain and when the monster had the key, however, my suggestion that the doctor could be called for Kathy's illness was met with, the doctor is sick. Another favorite variation was for Ellie to be the mother, and I either the baby or the bratty child. The impressive element in this fantasy was the extraordinary patience of this mother. She was absolutely the most forbearing of parents. In one version, Ellie directed me to cry and to demand soup even while she was in the process of making some. I want soup, I demanded, banging on the... Oh, that's the baby's voice. I demanded, banging on the table, and I don't want to wait. At first, she answered me quietly and with a patience that surely would have melted the most incorrigible heart. I am making the soup, and it will soon be ready. As I followed her directions and kept up the din, however, her anger began to rise until finally it exploded in a roar. Sometimes after the soup was finished, I was instructed to change my mind. I don't want any, I yelled. At times, perhaps most often, her response would continue to be remarkably patient, but at others we engaged in a yelling match. Wanting soup alternated with getting hungry at night or either in the morning. I'm hungry, I shouted. I want something to eat. And again the mother, drooping with fatigue and half asleep, patiently went to the refrigerator. All right, darling, I'll get you something to eat, she reiterated in very gentle tones. You don't have to shout. Ellie's awareness of her inner problems was most clearly revealed in this theme. Her need to oppose was so troublesome to her, however, that frequently she tackled it directly. One day, for instance, on her way to the bathroom, she instructed me, Say, don't go to the bathroom. I complied and she went freely. One day, while toasting a slice of bread at her request, I reminded her, You know, Ellie, children often tell me their problems, and I help them. I know, said Ellie. I have two problems. I want to be a baby, and I wet my bed. Although Ellie did not have much more to say about either of them at the time, enough was apparently established so that when her mother once more raised the question of the bedwetting, Ellie informed her, I'm discussing that problem with Miss Bloch. The key disclosure for which I had been waiting came only a short time later. As I opened the door to the waiting room to greet Ellie, I was met with, Close your eyes and I will guide you to the playroom. I waited until her hand found mine and led me down the long hallway. When we reached the room, she let go and allowed me to find my way to the chair I usually sat in. Don't open them until I say, she directed, and after a few moments she added, First, feel this. I allowed my hands to wander over an object that she had brought with her and had placed on the table. Something feels very furry, I said. After a few moments, she commanded, Open them. Without asking me to guess its identity, it's an Eskimo doll. My daddy went to Chicago, and he came home last night, and he brought her. I made some comment to the effect that she liked her daddy to bring her presents, to which she answered with enthusiasm. Then suddenly she asked, Where's the cat? Referring to a rag doll that she had played with in the previous session. I indicated the closet, and she found it, along with a small Japanese rattle that immediately inspired her. Would you like to see me dance? She asked, shaking the rattle as though were castanets. She danced in circles with a great deal of verve. A dance of happiness, I commented as she finished. She looked at me somewhat strangely and said, I can also do a dance of sadness. Half closing her eyes and with an expression of deep and moving sorrow, she slowly turned. This is a dance of sadness, I agreed as she came to a stop. If I wanted, the dance of sadness could go on until the next patient came and until tomorrow and next week. You feel very sad, I replied, moving beyond belief by this first direct disclosure by Ellie of her real feelings. Yes, my friend died, she stated so simply that for a moment I wondered if it were true. How did she die, I asked. She was killed. A character with a gun shot her. It was 30 years ago. My queries about details drew a very confused statement that nevertheless established, among other things, that a character, according to Ellie's description, was either a drunk or a derelict, and that as her friend was walking in the park, he hit her. At first she ran away, but then she returned and hit him back, and that was when he shot her, not being sure where this was tending. I marveled at her bravery, stating, Usually a little girl would run and tell her mother or call a policeman. She was very brave to run back and hit him. Do you believe me? She suddenly asked. Shouldn't I asked. I don't know, but do you? I'm not sure, I answered. It's a story, Ellie confessed. You know what I mean. It's not real. You made it up, I added. She nodded. I had been waiting for this moment ever since Ellie had announced a year and a half before. I don't like to think of myself as a giraffe. Now, I said, I think you're very upset about your father. She readily agreed. Children very often tell me what upsets them and why they're sad, and I can help them. I added, My father wants to kill me. She stated very simply, and I don't know why. What makes you think he wants to kill you? I asked. I know he does, she assured me. Do you think he really will? I asked. Yes, I think he will. But how will he kill you? With his gun. He has a gun from the war. It's in the desk. He told me he threw the bullets away. If he threw the bullets away, I asked, then how can he kill you with the gun? He can buy more. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I know that your father will never kill you, I assured her. I know, but I can't believe it. I asked him and he said he wouldn't, but I keep on believing he will. In my further effort to disabuse her of this conviction, I summoned up the image of the law and the jail that would inevitably be her father's lot if he killed her. I succeeded, however, only in alarming Ellie. Yeah, because you didn't say your father loves you and would never do that, she said. If he kills you, you'll go to prison. This lady's an awful therapist. Couldn't he come out? She asked worriedly. Could I go where he is and kiss him? For the past minute, I had been casting about for an effective approach, and I finally decided that only a direct confrontation might help. Ellie, I said, I've been wondering how I could help you. Would you like me to talk to your father about it? She agreed eagerly and immediately added, Can I be there? The request was unexpected, but I agreed and asked, Should I telephone this evening to arrange it? Ellie was very willing. At the end of the session, she went to meet her mother in the waiting room, and I heard her explaining, Miss Bloch is going to call Daddy to talk about why he wants to kill me. At that point, I asked Ellie's permission to explain it further to her mother and stated, Ellie can't stop believing that her father will kill her and wants me to talk to him. We agreed that I will telephone this evening. What do you think is a good time? The mother's face was a study in shock and consternation. She accepted very readily, however, a situation that I had actually discussed with her innumerable times. Well, I think 7:30 would be a good time to call, she quietly said. When I phoned that evening, her husband answered. Has Ellie told you the reason for my call? I asked. I heard the words, he replied. We agreed that Ellie's next session would be the best arrangement. I then suggested that he check first with Ellie before we made it final. He returned spluttering with a mixture of indignation and amusement, and at bottom amazement that his 5-year-old daughter was to be taken seriously. I agree with him. And we're going to stop there because I got to go to work at some point and eat lunch. And all right, goodbye, bros. Goodbye.